Hello, everyone. This is a continuation of the lecture on leveling. So if you have not watched that video, please do review it just to make sure you're familiar with the key components that we discussed and are comfortable actually applying it, which is what we want to look at today. So you might remember from the walkthrough video, I had you highlight the different sections requirements, if it was 3 out of 3 key components were required or if 2 out of 3 key components were required. And when we get to actual application, this is where this really comes into play and is really important, okay? So if 3 out of 3 components are required, then all 3 key components must be equal to or greater than the level that's described in that code in order to use that code. If only 2 out of 3 key components are required, then we have a little bit more flexibility, and only 2 have to be equal to or greater than that level in order to use the code. If this seems like Greek to you, that's fine. It actually really only makes sense once we get into the book and start applying it. But before we did that, I wanted to show you this little chart, which is really just combining the 3 charts that I had in the previous video. And it's just a helpful tool that I like to use when I am trying to figure out a level and make sure I can keep track of each key component and where they're at. If there are similar charts to this in your book, that actually relate directly to the codes. So you don't necessarily have to use this, but if it's helpful for you, feel free to copy it in there. You can put it in your notes page, whatever you want to do. So I just wanted to show this to you, and so that way you can remember that the components go from lower level of complexity all the way up to the highest complexity. And if you get an example or a note or something like that, that's very complicated, has a lot of detail in it, you can use something like this to keep track of which level you're at for each key component, okay? So I'm going to switch over to the document camera real quickly so we can kind of go through a little bit of the book before we get into an actual example. Okay, so here's our 2021 CPT manual, and E&M is going to be the very first section. So we can flip right up to it. And so I am on page 1, actually, not Roman numeral, number 1. And the reason why I want to bring your attention to this, most of the time, yes, we'll flip up to the first page of content like I always have you do. But if you are unfamiliar with a section, then and you're trying to find a certain subsection in here, the table of contents at the beginning of the section is very helpful, and I would definitely recommend using it, especially as you get more familiar with that section. It does a great job of directing you to the exact subsection that you're looking for, and often will include things like new patient, established patients, subsequent service, initial service, things like that are very, very helpful. And just very quickly getting to the right section and the right code levels that you're looking for, okay? So if you are new to using E&M, I would recommend once you know which section you need to be in, maybe it's preventive care, maybe it's nursing home care, something like that, and you have not used this section extensively, go ahead and just look it up because it'll be so much easier than trying to flip through the pages. But once you do get into the section itself, you can flip through and find the correct section that you're looking for. Okay, so what might be helpful once you get to the right section is to look at and see if it's required key components, or if if 3 out of 3 are required, or if 2 out of 3 are required. Okay, so let's just come up with a scenario really quickly. Okay, and I'm coming up with this on the fly, so please forgive me. Just going to kind of write it here. Okay, so say we're going to do an inpatient consultation. Say we have a situation like this. And luckily that's the page I'm on, very convenient. And it's going to have detailed history, detailed exam, MDM of high complexity. So we already know all the important parts, right? We know what section we need to be in. We know what the history looks like. We know what the exam looks like. We know what the MDM looks like. Remember, that's medical decision making. Then we're going to look in this section. We're going to say it's required these 3 key components. Okay. It's right up there. Each one specifies. So each of these codes is describing the same service. It's just increasing in level of complexity. And so then it's obviously going to increase in level of reimbursement. However, for this section, all 3 key components must be at this level or at a higher level in order to use that code. And you might use this if you're trying to figure out where we're at. We're at detailed, and high complexity. So you'll see that high complexity is going to be, for MDM, is at a higher level than the detailed exam or history, okay? So that makes it a little tricky when we're looking at it. Let's go through and look at the different codes. We'll start just with the highest one. And for this one, 99255, MDM is high complexity, comprehensive exam, comprehensive history. Comprehensive exam is going to be more complex than detailed, and it's for exam and history, okay? So we know that we can't use this code because all 3 key components need to be at this level or higher. Okay, so here we have, again, comprehensive history, comprehensive examination, moderate complexity. And so for this scenario, yes, MDM would fit into that, again, because it fits into this high complexity, and then it would fit into, and of course, if it's at a higher level, it's going to encompass everything below it, right? So MDM of high complexity would also cover low complexity, moderate complexity, straightforward, of course. But again, we're looking at comprehensive history and comprehensive examination, and we only have detailed history, detailed exam. Okay, so that code is not going to work. We come here to 99253, we have detailed history and detailed exam and MDM of low complexity. Now that meets 2 out of our 3 very easily. We know we need detailed history, detailed exam, but we have a high complexity of MDM, and this says 3 key components are required. But remember, when you're doing these levels, it means it needs to be at this level or higher. So it couldn't be lower. We couldn't have an MDM that was straightforward and fit in here, but we could have an MDM that was higher than this level. And high complexity, of course, is going to be higher than low complexity. So the MDM of high complexity would still fit into this category. It's going to fit into the category that it's set at, this high complexity category, this code, and it's going to encompass every code underneath it that's at a lower complexity than it. So here we'd have a detailed history, detailed exam, and MDM of low complexity. We have high complexity, but that fits into this category. So we're still able to use this code. So if you came upon this situation, detailed history, detailed exam, MDM of high complexity, you could use this code without worry, okay? So that is how you would handle a situation where we have 3 out of 3 key components are required, but you have a scenario where one of them doesn't fit explicitly in that category and is at a higher level. All right. So that is kind of how we start working through the E&M section. And I'm going to flip back over to the PowerPoint so we can look at a real example, and I'll do additional videos that have other scenarios because there's just endless combinations of this that we can get through. But I did kind of want to show you that trickiest part, which I think most people run into, where one key component is at a much higher level or at a different level than the other 2. So that comes up pretty frequently. I'm going to flip back over to the PowerPoint right now. Okay, so this is what an actual example will look like. It's very similar to what you might see in your workbook or possibly on a quiz, hint, hint. So let's read through it because it's very important that we're able to kind of dissect these as we go. So it says subsequent follow-up care is provided for the 82-year-old male nursing facility patient with Alzheimer's disease. The resident has responded well to some new medications and appears to have recovered some of his cognitive abilities without behavioral disturbances. The physician performs a problem-focused history and physical examination on his neurological problem and orders the current treatments continue. The MDM complexity is low. Okay, so in this scenario, you would likely be asked to code the ICD-10 and also the CPT code, which would be an E&M code in this scenario because we're not doing any kind of procedures. It's just doing an exam and making some medical decisions. So first thing you would want to note about the ICD-10, which we're not going to get into in this video, but it's going to be dementia, Alzheimer's scenario, and then I'd look at with or without behavioral disturbances if you're needing some guidance on that. But when we get into the CPT, the important thing to note here is subsequent follow-up care. So you might remember from our walkthrough that the E&M section is usually divided into initial and subsequent. However, when you look at documentation, it doesn't always say subsequent. Often it'll just say follow-up. So it's just important to remember that follow-up means the same thing as subsequent and make a note of it if you're new to using those terms. The other important thing to note here is we are looking at nursing facility. So he's a nursing facility patient, and nursing facilities are different from assisted living and also different from inpatient. So yes, they are in a facility. So all of those are some type of facility, but inpatient relates specifically to hospital setting, and assisted living and nursing facilities are divided based on the level of care that they provide. They're reimbursed very, very differently. So we are going to be looking at subsequent nursing facility care. The next things we're going to need for leveling that care. So this is the section, the subsection of E&M is going to be subsequent nursing facility care. And then we need to find the levels that we're looking at. So the key components that we're going to need are problem-focused history and a physical examination. So the physical examination and the history are at the same level. They're both problem focused, and they're just focused on that neurological issue, which is the Alzheimer's disease. And then the MDM is low. So the MDM complexity is low. So those are the things that we are going to look at. Oh, let me delete all these. Okay, so if we are trying to make a note of this, then we have problem-focused history, problem-focused exam, and then low complexity of MDM. And then, as you can see, that's at a different level than their history and exam. So straightforward is the lowest level of MDM, and low complexity is just a little bit more complicated than that. So this is what we are going to be looking for. Let me flip to the document camera. And if you want to stop now and see if you can find it on your own, that would be great. Otherwise, you can just follow along with me. Okay, so this is what we're looking for is subsequent nursing facility care with a problem-focused history and exam and low MDM. So let's flip up to our E&M section. And again, if you are not super familiar with it, you can come and look for nursing facility care here in the table of contents. And it should be a main section, and then we'll see if subsequent is underneath it. Okay, so we have nursing facility services here, and it gives you a code range, so you could definitely just go flip to that. But it does specify here that there's subsequent care right here, and we know follow-up is subsequent. So we're going to look at page 34, and it also gives us a code range here, so that's helpful. but page 34 is probably the easiest way to get there. So here we have, okay, subsequent nursing facility care. We know we're in the right section. All of these codes in this section describe the same thing. Follow-up, subsequent nursing facility care, which is what we are looking for. Now we just need to pick the right level of code, okay? So we have a problem-focused history and a problem-focused exam and low MDM. So if we come and look at all of the codes, which usually you're not going to, you're going to go right to the ones you're going to say, oh, where's this MDM? And I'm going to look at that. But for now, let's just look through them. There's not that many. This has an MDM of high complexity, a comprehensive examination, and a comprehensive interval history, which is just made the history. And see here, all of these codes are going to require 2 out of the 3 key components, at least, need to meet or exceed the level that's described in the code. So it's a little bit different from the inpatient consultation one we looked at, but let's just go ahead and look through it and we'll see how it plays out. So here, MDM is high, comprehensive exam, comprehensive history. None of that fits into our scenario, right? We don't have any of those. And then here again, we have moderate complexity of MDM and detailed history and exam. Neither one of those fit. None of those fit here. Up here, we have an expanded problem-focused history, expanded problem-focused examination, and MDM is low complexity. Now that seems to fit really well, right? Because we have problem-focused history, problem-focused exam, and low MDM. Low MDM fits right in there. Sounds exactly right. But when we look at our little chart that I showed you, you can see that there is a difference between problem-focused exam and expanded problem-focused. Expanded is a little bit higher on the chart than problem-focused. So these two are not going to fit into this category. So this would not necessarily be the best code. Let's look and see the next code. So this is the lowest level code in this section. And it has problem-focused interval history, problem-focused exam, and straightforward medical decision-making. So now these two fit into this category perfectly, right? We have problem-focused history, problem-focused exam. That's exactly what we want, right? And then MDM is straightforward, described here, but ours is low. Now we can just go ahead and use this code because 2 of the 3 key components are met perfectly. We know exactly where we're at. We have exactly the right thing. We can use this without worry, right? But remember what I showed you in that inpatient consultation example, that low on our chart, low MDM is a little bit higher than straightforward. So low really encompasses everything that's covered in straightforward MDM anyway. So really we're fitting into this section perfectly. So all 3 of our components are met because we're at or above the level that's described in that code, okay? So I would pick, if I saw this scenario on an exam, on a quiz, on the national exam, I'd probably come and look at these 2 codes because these are the ones that have the exact terminology that I'm looking for. And then decide between them. And then this one's going to fit the best because it very clearly defines 2 of our 3 key components. And then I already know, just because I'm aware of how this chart works, that low fits into that perfectly because low is going to encompass everything that's covered in straightforward, okay? So I'm going to go with 99307. Okay, let's flip back over and see if that was correct. Okay, so yes, we are at the correct code. If you are confused about how I got there, if this is totally still Greek to you, please let me know in the discussion and we can do further examples. I'm still going to do some other examples of some different scenarios that we might run into. But if you have no idea how I got here, I want to know so I can make it clearer for you. Okay. Thank you all. Bye-bye.